Delighted you're with us, folks. Welcome into our ESPN FC studios. Craig Burley, Stuart Robson. My name is Kevin Egan. What a game that was. 2-2, the final score between the Netherlands and Japan. After 42 minutes, this fella, Robbo, said, this is the worst game of the tournament so far.
Negative.
And then it took off.
It certainly did. It was the worst game of the tournament because these are the sort of games I was worried about where the defenders had loads of the ball, they didn't pass it forward, there wasn't forward runs, they were passing amongst themselves. There was a stat at the end of the first half that said that Van Dijk had touched it 76 times, I think it was. And so they weren't passing the ball forward. But it all changed in the second half, and the players and the coaches did exactly what needed to be done. They started to play forward, there was more movement, players went in 1v1 situations, there was a lot more dynamism about it. It was much better in the second half.
Is that not partly because Japan were a little negative in the first half? Maybe sat a little bit deeper?
But remember, we've watched Real Madrid over the course of the last couple of years. When teams drop off, we say, come on, you've got to pass it forward. You've got to get crosses in. You can't just keep passing it around the back. And that's what the Dutch did. They were so slow in their play in the first half.
It was almost like in the first half, Kevin, the Japanese were like, we know we're a good side. We know we can compete with Holland. But this is a World Cup. There's a lot of pressure on, and certainly a lot of pressure back home in Japan. A lot of expectation back home in Japan because of a lot of the players they have. And it was almost like a little bit fearful in the first half, and then they gained that confidence as the second half went on, got themselves back in the game, started to prod away at that Dutch backline, and it ended up being a super competitive game. We had a little discussion while we were watching the game because we watched Germany earlier, beat Curacao easily 7-1, and we said, where are we with the Dutch in terms of how competitive are they going to be in this tournament? How far could they go? And I liken them to Germany. I kind of think that's a similar standard. So middle of the road, maybe.
Second tier, so if you have France and Spain, say.
Yeah,
right,
and I chucked them in with Brazil. When we had a conversation on the show last night with Dan, said, but it's Brazil. And that's a bit like saying, I think we were talking earlier, but it's Real Madrid in the Champions League, so it's like a flick in the switch. It's automatic because it's that competition. I don't think it is. And I do think they're at that second level where they're a good side and they've got good players, but have they got enough? Again, we were talking Daniel Malin through the middle. Had a good season at Villa, or good-ish, coming off the bench and then starting, then he made a big move. But is he going to be the guy, if he plays through the middle, to score the goals? Is Kai Havertz going to be the guy to do it for Germany? These are the big questions.
This is definitely a different Dutch side, isn't it? It's not that total football at all. And even as a striker, Malin is certainly not Kluivert. He's certainly not Van Nistelrooy or Van Persie.
But the Dutch haven't been total football for many, many years. When they were talking in the 70s, when Cruyff was playing, it was total football because there was a lot of rotation. Every player could pass the ball forward. Every player could make runs. It was just about people fitting in positions when they could. Now it's very structured. The Dutch football is very structured. People stay in their positions. They pass it along the back. They don't give it. They like not to give it away, so they play an easy pass rather than a hard pass. But in the second half, when obviously Koeman has said, no, we've got to play with more intensity. We've got to pass the ball forward. They looked a much better side. Suddenly we saw Somerville running with the ball, scored his goal. We saw Gakpo playing higher up the field. Reinders played higher up the field in the second half. It was a much better performance. And to Craig's point, Marlon, is he an out-and-out centre-forward? I don't think he is. We've often seen him play in wide areas, so that might be a weakness for them.
But at midfield, on the face of it, in midfield, Gravenberg didn't have a good season at Liverpool. We were talking about that. He was brilliant the year before. But on the face of it, if he can hit form, Gravenberg, Frankie de Jong, who was excellent for Barcelona when fit, and Tijani Reinders, who's a good player, I think didn't always fit in at Man City, but I think if you take his form from Milan, where he was that box-to-box scoring goals, they've got a good balance in the middle of the park. It's whether, again, similar conversation to the Germany team and maybe one or two others, and maybe we'll get to this conversation with Portugal, who have got a super talented side, but is a 40-year-old Ronaldo the man up front to carry them to something a little bit special? So there's a lot of questions about some of these nations that maybe just fall a little bit below the big Europeans, which is France and Spain. So a really competitive game, and don't want to take anything away from Japan. They're a very tidy side, can play some good stuff. I think where they might fall down a little bit, they lack a bit of physicality. And when it comes to the physical side of the game, that's what may cost them.
Yeah, Virgil van Dijk needed a big performance. He needs a big World Cup if the Dutch are going to try and go far and win their first ever World Cup. It still is hard to
Well,
believe
there's a prediction from some German guy that we ran on the FC show, which I absolutely clobbered, obviously, that the Dutch, that his whatever scenario over the last few years has been correct. He's called every World Cup winner for the last, or European World Cup, European Championship winner for the last, I don't know, 4, 5 or 6 years, and he's predicted the Dutch, through data, the Dutch are going to win it. I know you're looking at me, because I'm thinking the same thing. How the hell? Yeah. It's per capita, and it's not necessarily down to football. I know, I scratched my head as well.
And he's predicted every correct World Cup winner.
So says him.
Yeah, apparently so. And he said that the Dutch are going to win it.
The previous two and the previous 2 European Championship winners.
But there's been a common denominator when we're talking about Germany,
and I
when
think
we're talking about the Dutch, when we're talking about several other teams. The centre forward has gone out of fashion in football. The centre forward.
I don't like it. I don't like it.
We had this discussion earlier, didn't we?
The centre forward that can run in behind, the centre forward that can hold up the play, the centre forward that gets on the end of crosses in the air, is lively in and around the box. And it's mainly because teams have now started to play with just one up front and 2 wide players, so there's not enough support to the front player. And that was the case in the first half with Marlon. When they had it at the back and they're looking, I'm not really going to play the ball because there's 2 defenders against him. There's a holding midfield player in front of him. So we pass it square and backwards again. So, yeah, the centre forward is going out of fashion at the moment, and that's why we want to see the likes of Erling Haaland have a wonderful
100%.
tournament.
Well, he's definitely not out of fashion.
No, he's not out of fashion, but he doesn't touch the ball that much.
I know what you say. For a lot of countries and a lot of clubs, if you're that front man that does a little bit of the physical work, puts his head in for crosses, but isn't the greatest link-up player, you may be 20, 30 goals a season at your club, but you're probably going to spend a lot of time on the bench because you don't have other facets that these managers want in the game. It's just the way the game is going. To get back to your point, Van Dijk, huge World Cup for him, had a poor season at Liverpool as the leader, as the captain. Wasn't alone because his centre-half partner, Konate, was terrible. And Kerkez struggled when he came in. But I don't think he led very well through problematic times. And I think there's a lot of expectation on him, not necessarily that Holland are going to win the World Cup, but a lot of expectation on him to lead this team from the front to a better World Cup. And I was saying this to you before we came on air. He gets a lot of stick back in Holland. I mean, they do, like a lot of countries, they tend to be very critical of their national team, particularly the big players. But he gets the brunt of it from the Hullets and the Van Bastens and all these big players. They don't think he's a bad player. They don't think he's a leader or a proper leader. That's the criticism that comes his way. And I think he smarts at that criticism. And he has an opportunity here to sort of lead this Dutch side to have a very good World Cup. I just don't think they're going to be good enough to get... If they get to the semis, I think that would be a very good World Cup for them.
We saw the best and worst of Van Dijk today. He scored a good goal with his head, and he was a threat in the air. He defended his box fairly well, particularly in the latter stages of the game. He won a lot of balls in the air. But there was one, I think it was probably only about 10 minutes into the game, when the centre-forward for Japan came short and spun him down the side of him, and he got any shot across the goal. And Van Dijk's movement was really poor.
Is this just father time?
A little bit. And also, I don't think... And I've watched Van Dijk, and he's been a brilliant player, no question about that. But he's found it at times too easy because his pace has got him out of problems. But he's losing that pace now, and I don't think he always stays focused and concentrated. And that was the case with that run. He was watching the play, and the fella came short and span on him. Suddenly the ball was played in behind. He couldn't get there, and unfortunately for the Dutch, the shot was just wide of the far post.
The Koeman rubber with those players has got, when you think about the players he has at the back, he has a choice if he wants to change the shape of this side with Van de Ven playing left back.
Yeah.
Who has done that for the Dutch on several occasions, but he's not a left-back. But he's very quick, as we know. Didn't have a great season at Tottenham, but he can move to a back three. He can bring the wing-backs in. He's got Denzel Dumfries on that side. So he's got a choice in that sense that, even back four in possession and, back three when they're out of it, or vice versa. Teams are doing that these days. So Ronald Koeman, particularly being the centre-half that he was in his career, should have the nous, if it's not going right for Holland, to be able to make those changes within a game.
Moriyasu, the manager for Japan, says they can make a deep run in this tournament. Who's going further? If you had to pick one of these two teams right now, Robbo?
I would go with the Dutch because at the start of the game, it was them that wanted to play. The Japanese were they were compact, they were fairly negative to start with. They dropped off, they allowed the Dutch to have lots of the ball, although the Dutch didn't do that much with it in the first half.
But is that not intentional? Did it not suit their style of play?
To a certain degree, but I don't think you're going to go that far in the tournament if you're going to sit back and try and play on the counter-attack.
They've never made a quarter-final.
The teams that are going to win this tournament aren't going to be counter-attacking teams. They're going to be teams that dominate the game. Dominate the game, play in the top half of the field, and have
always
the skill.
Been the case, hasn't it, in the World Cup?
Yeah, and have the skill and the ability to break teams down. Kubo played well when they changed his position. He was out on the right-hand side to start with, didn't really get involved in the game. When they started to get back in the game in the second half, Kubo came in, he had a couple of good shots, he started to pass the ball. He's going to be key for them.
I think football's changed in the sense that there is still room for a defensive display and a defensive team, but I think it's fallen by the wayside a little bit more now. I think teams, from club teams to the players to how they train every week to the national team, are more expansive than it used to be. Games a little bit quicker, a bit more open, and so therefore World Cups and European Championships and you know, African Cup of Nations and Copa Americas, whatever, teams are going to have to go out and win those things rather than try and defend your way there.
Who won't agree with us? That would be about, I don't know, 50,000 Australians and Popovic, the Australian coach, because Australia won the game yesterday playing very defensively.
One game,
well, I mentioned...
I'm saying one game.
Yeah, you can do it in the... Yeah, I mean, I mentioned...
You can do it in a one-off game, yeah.
We were talking about Arsenal in the Champions League final playing the way they did, which I think most of us thought was a pretty poor effort in terms of how they lacked any desire to go and play. And I'd mentioned Greece in the 2004 Euros doing something similar. It wasn't pretty, but it was effective. I just think that style of play, which is the old sort of Mourinho when he was at Inter Milan, you know, Champions League final against Bayern Munich, they barely get out their half, but they won it. You could still get results that way in the odd game, but I don't think you can through a whole tournament these days playing that way and being successful. I think the game has changed, and the expansiveness of the game and the quality of some of the players is enabling teams to go and express themselves. And I think we saw that from Japan in the second half. And I think we'll see that from a lot of teams, particularly the Spanish, maybe the Brazilians, certainly the French. Teams will go and try and, I think, win games rather than sit in waiting for counter-attacks.
Italy in 06 is probably the last team I can think of that didn't dominate the game on the front foot the whole time, that went on to win a World Cup.
They still had good players.
They
still had good players, and they weren't... Against the weaker sides, they'd go and win the game. Against the stronger sides, they... all the good coaches, even the best Dutch coaches, even the best Arrigo Sacchi, when he was the manager of the brilliant Milan side, when they were a high-pressing team, he had different areas where they pressed. Against the very best teams, he said, we press from just inside their half. Against the medium teams, we defend halfway inside their half. Against the bad teams, we press right from the front. So you have to pick and choose who you press against.
Well, I think the US men's national team performance would be the case in point. It was all right, and it was Paraguay, and they're a good side, but it wasn't the toughest game, but it wasn't an easy game. But I think that would be a case in point about how a lot of the better teams might approach this World Cup, which was pressing, forward passing, trying to get in behind teams quickly, find that space quickly, don't allow teams to get back in a block, which some of the teams will try and do to get a point here and a point there for qualification. But I think the quicker these elite teams play, they'll just open teams up. And I think we saw that with the US when they dismantled a Paraguay side that's defensive record and CONMEBOL was actually very, very good.
Yeah, okay. The Dutch fans we'll get to in a moment because we absolutely love them. But Japan, I mentioned they never made it to a quarter.
Oh, there was a Dutch fan on the way to the studio here.
Yeah, there was.
But she's not very happy. Somebody was mocking her. I don't know, mocking the result. But was it you?
No, it wasn't me. Would I do something like that?
Japan, quarter-final, they've never made it. Can they make it that far in this tournament, do you think?
They can, but I think they're going to have to improve. I think they've had a great qualification. You know, they came into this tournament with some very good results. They did well in their pre-tournament friendlies over the last year. They were the first side to qualify, other than the three that hosted the competition. But there's something just lacking to make them a top team.
You nailed it with the physicality. Like, you could see it on corner kicks, exactly.
You could see it. Yeah. And it's not always about physicality, but as you well know, this season in particular, we're talking about English football. It's been about set pieces, a lot of it. In fact, it's been so frustrating.
All I would say is,
dull.
How did they get their equaliser?
Yeah.
Make it 2-2?
Yeah, true.
Yeah. Listen, no. Hey, Max. No, I'm talking about defending set pieces.
Okay, yeah.
But you know the thing is, whenever we talk about how far a team's going to go, I need to have the biggest bracket on the planet in front of me. Because there's so many groups, there's so many teams, there's going to be 32, I believe, qualify. As many teams that played in the last World Cup are going to qualify. So I've this bracket is like a tree with 1,000 limbs.
I think we've also got
no idea what they'll...
Just get Kevin to understand that only 8 teams can get through to the quarterfinals. Yeah. You can't have 48 teams in the quarterfinals. I think you're trying to press us that all these teams.
No, I know. It's the luck of the draw in a lot of ways. Like you could have Argentina and Spain, for example. If one of them slips up once, one draw could see the two of them face each other in the round of 32. So a massive element of luck will play a role here.